Hey everyone, tonight we're going to step into a kitchen. But not just any kitchen. This one is vast, open air, and it exists hundreds of years in the past, under a sun you've never felt. Imagine the air, thick with the smell of roasting fish, ground spices, and red dust kicked up by 1,000 passing feet. You can hear the rhythmic thump of a fufu pestle and a dozen different languages weaving through the calls of merchants. This is the world that gave birth to a cuisine, long before it was ever called Southern. And frankly, given the complete lack of refrigeration and the fact that your water source is that river over there, you probably wouldn't survive this for a week. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. As always, I'd love to see where you're all watching from, so drop your city and local time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing at the edge of a sprawling market somewhere in 17th century Senegambia. The sun is a heavy blanket on your shoulders, and the ground is a tapestry of rust-colored earth. Your senses are completely overwhelmed in the best way possible. There are no neat aisles, no price tags, no little signs with allergy warnings. To your left, a woman sits surrounded by pyramids of fiery red and green peppers, her hands moving deftly as she bundles them with twine. To your right, a man gestures passionately, negotiating the price of a bolt of dazzling indigo cloth. The air carries the complex perfume of roasted peanuts, the sharp tang of fermenting locust beans, and the rich, almost sweet scent of red palm oil. The chicken you're about to haggle for is so fresh it's currently busy inspecting your sandals with a critical eye. This isn't just a place to buy food. It's the heart of the community, a library of flavors and traditions spoken through ingredients. You wander deeper into the crowd. You see yams, true yams, not the orange sweet potatoes you call by the same name, piled high like logs. These starchy tubers are revered, central to the diet and culture, a symbol of sustenance and prosperity. You see women skillfully wrapping fish and seasoned pastes in large, pliable banana leaves before placing them over hot coals to steam. A simple and ancient technique for locking in moisture and flavor. This method will survive a forced transatlantic journey, reappearing in Caribbean and Southern cooking centuries later. You see baskets overflowing with leafy greens you don't recognize, some bitter, some mild, all destined for a bubbling stew pot. And everywhere, there's okra, young, tender pods sold by the handful, their unique mucilaginous quality, or draw, being the secret to thickening the region's famous soups and stews. A man offers you a piece of kola nut, a mainstream historical fact, being its immense cultural importance. It's not just a snack, it's a social ritual. To accept it is to accept friendship, to seal a contract, to show respect. You pop the bitter, leathery piece into your mouth and chew. It has a mild caffeine kick, a welcome lift in the afternoon heat. You notice how everything is built around a central pot. Cooking here is a communal act. Food is rarely portioned onto individual plates but served from a large central bowl, with families and friends gathering to eat with their hands, using a ball of sticky millet or sorghum porridge to scoop up the rich stew. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of stews was primarily due to culinary preference or the practical constraints of cooking over a single fire. Whatever the reason, the result is a masterpiece of flavor building, where ingredients meld together over hours into something complex and deeply comforting. It's an entire philosophy of food, one based on resourcefulness, community, and making the most of what the land provides. You see vendors selling smoked and dried fish, their salty, intense flavor forming the base note of many dishes. This is umami, long before the term was ever coined in Japan. It's a foundational flavor, a way to add depth and savoriness without relying on meat, which was often a luxury. Spices are sold whole, peppercorns, grains of paradise, dried ginger, and are ground fresh for each meal, releasing their potent, fragrant oils. It's a world away from pre-packaged, powdered spices sitting on a shelf for years. The market operates on its own rhythm. It opens with the sun and closes. Well, eventually. It's less of a rigid schedule and more of a collective feeling that the day's business is done. As you stand there taking it all in, The vibrant noise, the kaleidoscope of colors, the sheer overwhelming aliveness of it all, you feel a sense of profound connection to the food. It's not just fuel, it's culture, medicine, and social glue all simmering together in one pot. You don't know it yet, but this entire culinary universe, this deep well of knowledge passed down through generations, is balanced on the edge of a knife. An unfathomable tragedy is brewing far across the ocean, and it's coming for the very people whose hands craft this food, intending to steal them away from this world and carry their knowledge, uncredited, to a new one. The world of the sun-drenched market vanishes in a brutal, violent flash. One moment you are tasting the bitterness of a cola nut, the next, you are chained in suffocating darkness. The vibrant sounds of life are replaced by a constant, low moaning that becomes the soundtrack to your existence. You are in the hold of a ship, a wooden belly of a beast crossing an endless ocean. This is the Middle Passage, and its kitchen is a place of profound despair. The rich, complex perfumes of your home are a fading memory, aggressively overwritten by the stomach-turning stench of sweat, sickness, and terror. There is no hearth here, no communal pot to gather around. There is only a single large cauldron on the deck, a place you only see if you are one of the few forced above, for a brief, terrifying gasp of air. Your meals are delivered in darkness. A bucket of slop is passed down, and you get your share in a small wooden bowl if you're lucky. The ship's menu is refreshingly simple. Mush for breakfast, mush for lunch, and for dinner, surprise, more mush. At least you don't have to worry about decision fatigue. This gruel is often made from horse beans, a type of fava bean, boiled in seawater until they form a gritty, tasteless paste. Sometimes it's yams, but not the firm, comforting yams of home. These are often rotting, their sweetness turned sour, their texture slimy. A mainstream historical fact of this journey is that the diet was calculated with chilling precision. Just enough calories to prevent mass death, but not a single calorie more. The goal of the ship's captain was not to nurture, but to deliver cargo. Days blur into an indistinguishable nightmare. Time is measured only by the arrival of the food bucket and the twice-daily ritual of being forced onto the deck. You are herded from the darkness into the blinding sun, where sailors with whips force you to dance. They believe this exercise prevents muscle atrophy and keeps you marketable. It's the world's most horrific fitness class, complete with armed trainers and a zero-tolerance policy for not participating. It is here, on the deck, that you see the ship's kitchen in action. A single, harried cook, probably not gunning for any culinary award, stands over a massive pot, stirring the day's sustenance. His job is purely logistical, to prevent asset loss. Occasionally, something familiar is added to the pot. A sheen of red palm oil sometimes slicks the surface of the gruel. This isn't an act of kindness. It's a cynical tactic, a quirky historical tidbit born of pure economics. Slave traders noticed that the oil, a staple fat in West Africa, seemed to counteract the worst effects of dysentery and kept the skin of their captives looking healthier. A healthier-looking captive fetched a higher price. So they packed barrels of it, using a taste of home as a tool to maximize their profits. It is a cruel, twisted echo of the food you once knew, a flavor now associated not with community and celebration, but with survival and subjugation. The memory of wrapping fish in banana leaves, of grinding spices by hand, feels like a dream from another life, a story you might have been told about someone else. The psychological toll is as devastating as the physical one. You are surrounded by death. The sick are often thrown overboard with no ceremony. The cries of despair never cease. Historians still argue whether the high mortality rates from disease were exacerbated more by malnutrition or by the psychological trauma of the passage itself. Was it the lack of vitamins or the lack of hope that ultimately claimed so many lives? In this floating prison, food is just another weapon of control. Good behavior might earn you an extra half cup of water. Resistance could mean you get nothing at all. You learn to swallow the gritty mush without tasting it, to conserve every ounce of energy, to detach your mind from your body's suffering. After an eternity that is actually several weeks, a change occurs in the rhythm of the ship. The air begins to smell different. It carries a scent of damp earth, of green, growing things. a new land. But as you are finally herded onto the deck for the last time, blinking in the harsh light of a new sun, you feel no sense of relief. You see a coastline that is utterly alien. The trees are wrong, the birdsong is a foreign language. This is not the end of your journey. It is the beginning of another kind of nightmare. You have survived the saltwater kitchen's bitter broth, but now you face the terrifying uncertainty of the shore, a place where your knowledge, your culture, and your very name will be systematically stripped away, leaving only your hands to labor in a stranger's kitchen. Your feet touch the soil of the new world, but it offers no welcome. After the nauseating chaos of the auction block, a blur of prodding hands and foreign tongues assessing you like livestock, you are taken to a plantation. The landscape is a shock. The scale of it is overwhelming. Instead of the diverse tapestry of small farms and wild bush you knew, you see endless monotonous rows of a single plant stretching to the horizon. Tobacco, cotton, or perhaps sugarcane. The air is thick with a humidity that clings to you, a heavy, wet blanket you can't throw off. The familiar smells of home are gone, replaced by the cloying sweetness of magnolia and the sharp scent of pine. This is your new reality, a life of relentless, back-breaking labor under a sun that feels just as hot, but shines with no warmth. You are assigned to a small, rough-hewn cabin and given your weekly rations. This usually consists of a peck of cornmeal and a few pounds of salted pork or fish. It's the 18th century equivalent of a sad beige meal prep plan that you never ever get to cancel. It's a diet of pure, monotonous calories designed for field labor, not for health and certainly not for the soul. The salt pork is often rancid, the cornmeal coarse and insect-ridden. It quickly becomes clear that to survive, you will need more. The institution of slavery and its perverse economic logic often outsource the problem of its own survival back to you. This is where you are introduced to the provision ground. You are allotted a small patch of land, perhaps a quarter of an acre, usually the poorest quality soil farthest from the main house. You are generously given Sundays off to clear, plant, and cultivate it. This is a bit like your boss telling you to relax over the weekend by completing a mandatory, unpaid project that keeps you from starving. This small plot of dirt is both a lifeline and another form of bondage, tying you to the land and forcing you to expend your only day of rest in yet more labor. But it is also something more. It is the one place in this entire world where you have a flicker of autonomy. It is your garden. In the quiet hours of dusk or the precious day of rest, this patch of earth becomes a sanctuary. It's a place to reclaim a piece of yourself. You use the knowledge you carry in your head, the rhythms of planting, the needs of the soil, the signs of a healthy crop. And here is where a quiet miracle often takes place, a quirky but powerful fact of this forced migration. You and many others like you did not arrive empty-handed. In a final desperate act of foresight before being stolen away, women braided seeds into their hair. Tiny sesame seeds, small but potent pepper seeds, even grains of rice, carrying a literal piece of Africa with them through the horrors of the Middle Passage. These seeds, hidden and protected, are a tangible link to a world that was ripped away. You plant them with a prayer. When a tiny familiar green sprout pushes through the alien red clay, it is a moment of profound significance. It is proof that something of home can survive here. Your garden becomes a laboratory. You cultivate the African crops you manage to bring, the okra, the yams, the black-eyed peas, alongside the indigenous American crops you are introduced to, like squash, pumpkins, and various types of beans. You learn to work with what you have, applying African agricultural techniques to this new portfolio of plants. Suddenly, all the agricultural knowledge you carried as common sense is intensely valuable, though you won't be seeing any consulting fees. The compensation package is, shall we say, notably lacking. Historians still argue whether these garden plots were primarily a means of survival or a form of covert cultural resistance. The truth is they were indivisibly both. The vegetables you grow supplement the meager rations, keeping scurvy and malnutrition at bay. The surplus, if you are lucky enough to have any, can sometimes be sold or bartered, offering a sliver of economic agency. But just as importantly, the garden is a living archive. It's a place to speak your own language without fear, to teach your children the names of plants in your mother tongue, to pass down the agricultural wisdom of your ancestors. It is a stubborn refusal to be erased. As you kneel in the dirt, tending a fragile okra seedling, you are doing more than just growing food. You are cultivating memory. You are planting a seed of hope in the most poisoned of soils, nurturing a legacy that will, against all odds, take root and blossom. That tiny seedling you nurtured in your small garden plot begins to grow, and it is not alone. Beside it, other familiar shapes emerge from the foreign soil, a quiet but powerful African delegation making its presence known. Let's start with the okra. You watch the plant shoot upward, its leaves broad and its flowers a pale, lovely yellow, looking almost identical to hibiscus. Then the pods form, slender, green, and ridged. Back home, its name was derived from the Igbo word okuru, and it was a beloved staple. Here in this new world, it is an object of suspicion to the European palate. They don't understand it. When cooked, it releases a substance they might call slime, but you know better. To some, okra's mucilaginous texture is a flaw. To you, it's a feature, not a bug. It's the secret to transforming a thin, watery broth into a rich, velvety stew. It is a natural, gluten-free thickener that food bloggers in the distant future would rave about. This unique property, this draw, is a piece of culinary technology that you have brought with you, a concept entirely new to this continent. Nearby, a sprawling vine with delicate, clover-like leaves begins to cover the ground. This is the black-eyed pea, or cowpea. A native of Africa, it's a profoundly resilient plant. It thrives in the punishing summer heat and enriches the poor soil it grows in by fixing nitrogen. It's a giver, not just a taker. You cultivate it not just for the peas themselves, which you shell and dry for the winter, but also for the tender young leaves which can be cooked down like any other green. It is a workhorse of a crop, providing protein and nutrients from a single hardy plant. For now, it's simply survival food, a reliable staple to fill your belly. But in time, this humble pea will become a symbol of the entire South, a key ingredient in dishes like Hop and John, inexplicably linked with good luck and New Year's celebrations. Historians still argue whether the rapid adoption of black-eyed peas by white Southerners was due to their flavor and versatility, or their incredible resilience as a crop that could thrive in poor soil with little attention. You know the answer is both. It's delicious and it's nearly impossible to kill, a winning combination. Then there is the matter of the yam. You dig into the earth and pull out a large, dense tuber. But it's not quite right. The skin is thinner, the flesh is a vibrant orange or pale white, and its taste is distinctly sweet. This is not the starchy, neutral-flavored yam, Dioscorea, from back home. This is a sweet potato, Ipomoea batatas, a root native to the Americas. But your brain, searching for the familiar, maps all of your yam knowledge onto it. You bake it in embers, you boil it, you mash it. You call it by a name that echoes what you know, perhaps a variation of the West African word, nyami. It's like meeting a stranger who looks so much like your cousin that you just decide to call them by your cousin's name. It's bound to be confusing for future botanists and grocery shoppers, but it's remarkably efficient for you right now. You have the knowledge of how to handle a starchy tuber, and you apply it perfectly to this new sweet variety, creating a culinary bridge between two continents in a single act of cooking. These are not the only crops. You might be tending to sesame plants, which you know as bene. They're tiny oil-rich seeds destined to be pressed for oil or toasted and sprinkled over food, adding a nutty richness. You might have a patch of sorghum, its tall stalks providing a sweet syrup when pressed, a molasses-like flavor that will become essential to Southern baking. Your enslaver sees your flourishing garden and probably attributes it to some innate magical green thumb, a patronizing nod to your supposed primitive connection to the earth. He is completely ignoring the centuries of advanced agricultural science you carry in your head, the deep knowledge of intercropping, soil management, and seed selection. It is a classic case of not showing your work and letting the boss assume your success was just dumb luck. But your success is undeniable. Your garden is more productive, more diverse, and more resilient than the vast, failing monoculture fields it sits beside. And the people in the big house are beginning to notice the strange, slimy vegetable, the resilient little pea, the sweet, earthy root. These flavors are about to get a promotion, moving from your humble cooking fire to the demanding, cavernous kitchen of the main plantation house. Your success in the small garden plot has not gone unnoticed. You are brought out of the fields and into the crucible of the plantation, the kitchen of the big house. This is not the communal, open-air cooking space of your memory. This is a dedicated building, separate from the main house, partly to lessen the risk of fire, but mostly to keep the intense heat, smells, and noise of food production away from the delicate sensibilities of the enslaver's family. The moment you step inside, the air changes. It's a physical blow, a wave of heat that sucks the breath from your lungs. The room is cavernous, dark, and dominated by a fireplace so large you could walk into it. This hearth is the engine of the entire household, and from now on you are its master. There are no dials, no thermostats, no neat blue flames that appear with the click of a button. There is only fire, in all its raw and unpredictable glory. Your first and most important job is to learn its language. You learn to read the glow of the embers, to know the difference between the fierce, quick heat of newly lit oak and the slow, steady warmth of dying coals. You learn to measure temperature with your hand, holding it near the fire and counting the seconds before the primal instinct to pull away kicks in. It's not exactly a digital thermometer, but the results become remarkably precise. Managing this fire is a constant, exhausting dance. You are always feeding it, taming it, moving coals around on the hearth with a long iron shovel to create zones of varying heat for different tasks. The tools of your new trade are heavy and unforgiving. The cast iron pots, skillets, and Dutch ovens weigh a ton. Your daily workout is just moving them from their hooks to the hearth. Forget a gym membership. You're on the plantation fitness plan, and it comes with a complimentary all-day smoke facial. A large iron arm, called a chimney crane, is built into the fireplace wall, allowing you to swing pots directly over the flames, adjusting their height on trammel hooks to control the cooking speed. You learn to bake bread not in an oven, but in a cast iron Dutch oven, placing it directly on a bed of coals and piling more coals on the lid to ensure an even bake. It is a science learned through trial, error, and countless burns. For roasting, you might use a tin kitchen, a fascinatingly quirky piece of period technology. It's a metal box with a polished interior and an open side that faces the fire. A spit runs through the middle and you impale a joint of meat or a fowl onto it. The metal reflects the heat, roasting the meat as you turn the spit, and turn, for hours. It's your job to ensure the meat is basted, evenly cooked, and doesn't burn, a mind-numbingly tedious task that requires constant attention. You are not just a cook. You are a physicist, an engineer, and a manual laborer all rolled into one. You are the sole operator of a dangerous, primitive factory that produces impossibly elaborate meals. And the meals are indeed elaborate. As the head cook, you have the immense pressure of creating multi-course dinners that are meant to project the enslaver's wealth and status. Historians still argue whether the complex multi-course meals served in the big house were a reflection of the enslaver's desire to emulate European aristocracy, or a direct result of the culinary genius and expanded skill set of the enslaved cooks they commanded. From your perspective, standing in the searing heat, you know that the ambition of the mistress of the house is only made possible by your skill. She might wander in occasionally to supervise, perhaps to offer a suggestion or complain about the smoke, but she has no idea how to actually execute the culinary fantasy she demands. It's the original open-concept kitchen, with absolutely none of the charm. You are not alone in this space. There are others, younger children tasked with menial jobs like turning the spit or pounding spices, an older woman shelling peas in the corner. It is its own world, its own hierarchy, with you at the center. You are conducting a chaotic symphony of fire and iron, timing everything perfectly so that a dozen different dishes, each requiring a different temperature and technique, are all ready at the precise moment they are demanded. You have mastered this dance. The fire no longer intimidates you. The heavy iron is an extension of your own arms. You have tamed the hearth. And now with this mastery comes a quiet, subversive power. The power to begin introducing the flavors you understand, the techniques you remember, into the very food that sustains your oppressors. You stand in the sweltering heat of the kitchen, a bowl of uncooked rice in your hands. The grains are long, slender, and have a beautiful golden hue. To the family in the big house, this is just a food item, a staple to be served alongside the main course. But to you, this rice is a library of stolen knowledge, Harry. You let the grains run through your fingers and remember the story of how it came to dominate this land. A story that begins not in the plantation owner's study, but in the memories of your people carried across an ocean. Before your people arrived, the English colonists' attempts at large-scale agriculture in the swampy Carolina Lowcountry were mostly just a series of expensive ways to produce mud and mosquitoes. They had the right land, but the wrong know-how, like owning a brand new car with no idea how to drive it. They needed a key, and that key was the specialized centuries-old knowledge you and your people possessed. You know that the planters didn't just stumble upon success. They benefited from a massive, uncredited technology transfer from West Africa's rice coast, a region stretching from Senegal to Liberia, where rice cultivation was a deeply ingrained way of life. Historians still argue whether specific landholders intentionally sought out and purchased enslaved people from these regions for their expertise, or if it was a fortunate, profitable coincidence. But either way, the result was the same. The knowledge of how to tame the wetlands, how to build intricate systems of dikes, canals, and gates to control the tidal flows for irrigation was not in any European farming manual. It was in the minds of the enslaved men and women forced to carve these plantations out of the cypress swamps. You can picture the scene, played out over and over. You watch from a distance as your enslaver stands on a dry patch of land, scratching his head. You then demonstrate, or an elder demonstrates, the precise way to flood a field, the exact moment to drain it, how to manage the water to kill weeds but nourish the rice. The enslaver watches, nodding thoughtfully as if he's just discovered a law of physics. You can already imagine this brilliant new agricultural method being detailed in his next self-congratulatory letter to his colleagues in Charleston or London. The entire Lowcountry economy was built on this intellectual property, generating astronomical wealth and creating a powerful planter aristocracy. The rice was even given a grand name, Carolina Gold, but the gold was mined from the minds and bodies of your people. The expertise didn't stop in the field. After the back-breaking harvest, the rice had to be processed. This is where the women's knowledge came to the forefront. You know the sight of them, standing with wide, shallow fanner baskets, a piece of technology brought directly from Africa. These baskets, often beautifully woven from sweetgrass and rushes, were used to separate the grain from the chaff. With a rhythmic, practiced motion that is part skill, part art, a woman would toss the threshed rice into the air. The wind, her silent partner, would carry away the lighter husks while the heavier, precious grains fell back into the basket. It's a simple, elegant solution that requires immense skill, passed from mother to daughter. Now, back in the kitchen, the final step is yours. All that effort, all that knowledge can be ruined in the last 10 minutes by a careless cook. But you are not a careless cook. You know the secret to perfect rice is not just in the cooking but in the preparation. You wash the grains meticulously, rinsing away the excess starch until the water runs clear. You measure the water not with a cup, but with your finger, using the first joint as a guide to the perfect depth above the grain. While others make a sticky, clumped porridge suitable for patching walls, you create magic. You place the pot over a carefully managed bank of coals, letting it steam until every single grain is fluffy, distinct, and tender. It's a small, quiet act of perfection, but in a world where you control so little, this mastery is a profound victory. As you spoon the pristine, aromatic rice into a serving dish, you know its true worth. It is the foundation of the meal you are about to serve, and the foundation of the fortune that keeps this whole cruel system running. A fortune built on a secret you were forced to tell. The perfect fluffy rice you've just made is not meant to be eaten alone. It is a bed, a foundation waiting for the main event. You swing another heavy iron pot over the coals, its cavernous interior ready to receive a story. Today you are making a stew that will one day be an icon, a dish so essential to this region's identity that people will argue about its proper preparation with the ferocity of a theological debate. You are making gumbo, or at least its direct ancestor. Everyone wants to claim gumbo like it's the most valuable player in the culinary league. The French will point to their bouillabaisse, the Spanish to their regional stews, but you know the truth lies with the ingredients in your hands. The very name, gumbo, is a ghost on the tongue from your past. It's a direct descendant of West African words for okra, like kingombo from the Bantu languages. The star player is literally announcing its own origin story, even if no one else is listening. Your process begins. You might start with a roux, a technique of cooking flour and fat that you learned and perfected here, a contribution from the French colonists. But the soul of the dish arrives when you add the okra you brought from your own garden plot. As it cooks in the simmering liquid, it performs its magic, releasing its draw and transforming the watery broth into something with body and substance. You might even test it the old way, lifting a spoon to see if it creates a long, desirable, viscous string, a textural preference that is purely African. This isn't a quick 30-minute meal. This is a slow, day-long conversation between ingredients in a very hot cast-iron meeting room. Trying to speed up a gumbo is like trying to speed up the healing of a wound. It doesn't work, and you just mess things up. This method of cooking, the one-pot meal, is the culinary philosophy you grew up with. It is a direct echo of the communal pot in your village, where meats, vegetables, and spices simmered together for hours, their flavors melding into a harmonious whole. It's an efficient use of fuel and a practical way to feed many people. It's also a way to stretch scarce resources, turning a small amount of meat and a handful of vegetables into a generous, soul-satisfying meal, especially when served over that bed of absorbent rice. The mistress of the house might have a recipe for this dish written in her delicate handwriting in a leather-bound book. It probably contains vague, unhelpful instructions like add a handful of okra or stew until tender. Your recipe is not written down. It exists in the muscle memory of your hands, in your nose that can tell when the onions are perfectly softened, and in your palate that knows the precise moment the flavors have married. It's a much more sophisticated system, and it's completely fireproof. Into the pot go the other influences of this new land. Perhaps you add filet powder, a thickener made from dried and ground sassafras leaves, a technique and ingredient you learned from the local Choctaw people. You might add peppers for heat, shrimp from the coastal waters, or a piece of smoked sausage from the plantation smokehouse. The dish becomes a liquid history of the place you now live, a testament to the cultures clashing and combining on this soil. Historians and chefs of the future will still argue fiercely about what makes a real gumbo. Is it the African okra, the Choctaw filet, or the French roux? This endless debate is the dish's birth certificate, proof of its complex, multicultural parentage. But you know that while it may have many parents, its heart beats with an African rhythm. As the afternoon wears on, the kitchen fills with the rich, incomparable aroma of the simmering gumbo. It's a smell that is both savory and earthy, with layers of complexity. It is the smell of home, both the one you lost and the one you are inadvertently creating here. When the stew is finally ready, its flavor deep and its texture perfect, you ladle it into a fine porcelain tureen to be carried to the big house. They will eat it tonight and praise the mistress for her excellent table. They will have no concept of the history in their bowls, the generations of African culinary tradition, the Native American knowledge, and the European technique that you have masterfully woven together in a single pot. They just know it tastes good. For you, it is a quiet act of authorship, a signature written in steam and spice that will long outlive the people it was created for. The gumbo was a triumph, but there is no time to rest. A big event is looming at the plantation, a political rally, a holiday celebration, perhaps a wedding. An occasion that requires a spectacle. And in the 18th century South, no spectacle is grander or more impressive than a whole hog barbecue. This is not a task for the indoor hearth. This is a massive open-air operation. And once again, you are the one in command. You are the pitmaster. This is not grilling. Grilling is what you do with a small piece of meat over a hot fire for a few minutes. This is an entirely different art form, an act of patience and endurance. People in the future will get into vicious online fights about which regional barbecue style is authentic, completely unaware that the truly authentic method involves digging a trench and not sleeping for 24 hours. It's less of a culinary hobby and more of a grueling endurance sport. Your work begins the day before the feast. You direct the digging of a long, shallow trench in the earth. While others handle the heavy labor, your mind is on the fire. You select the wood with care. Hardwoods like hickory or oak, which will burn down to long-lasting, sweet-smelling coals. You start the fire in the pit and let it burn for hours, rendering the wood down to a perfect glowing bed of embers. There are no flames. This is the first principle of true barbecue. The heat must be indirect, low, and slow. While the word barbecue may have come from the Caribbean Taino term barbacoa for a raised wooden grate, the technique you employ, slow cooking meat in or over an earthen pit, has much deeper roots echoing the pit roasting traditions of West Africa used to tenderize tough game. The prepared hog, often splayed flat, is placed on a grate or framework over the trench of coals. And now, your long vigil begins. This isn't a set-it-and-forget-it situation. It's a long-term relationship with a pig in a pit. You have to be prepared to pull an all-nighter, a commitment made easier by the fact that your social calendar is, thanks to your enslavement, wide open. For the next 12, 18, sometimes 24 hours, you are tethered to this spot. You constantly monitor the temperature, adding or moving coals to ensure the heat remains even and gentle. Too hot, and the skin will burn while the inside remains raw. Too cool, and the meat will be tough and unsafe. You learn to read the smoke, the sizzle of the fat, the very smell of the air to know what the fire needs. In your hand, you hold a crucial tool, the mop. It's exactly what it sounds like, a bundle of clean rags tied to a long stick. Next to you sits a bucket of a thin, acidic liquid, the mop sauce. This is not the thick, sugary, tomato-based sauce of the future. This is a basting liquid likely made from vinegar, water, salt, and fiery peppers. You periodically lean over the intense heat, the smoke stinging your eyes, and mop the entire surface of the hog. This does three things. It keeps the meat from drying out during the long cook, it helps to build a delicious crust or bark, and it layers on a tangy, piquant flavor. Historians still argue about the precise origins of the tangy vinegar-based sauces of the Carolinas. Were they an attempt to replicate the acidic tamarind-based flavors of African cooking using New World ingredients, or a simple evolution of British basting traditions? As you mop the glistening skin, you know only that it works. The acidity cuts through the richness of the pork, a perfect balance you understand instinctively. Finally, after a full day and night of labor, it is done. The meat is so tender, it pulls away from the bone with the slightest touch. The fat has rendered completely, leaving the flesh succulent and juicy. The skin is a crisp, salty marvel. The smoky flavor has penetrated deep into the meat. It is a masterpiece of slow transformation. The mistress might believe the secret is in her family recipe for the mop sauce. The real secret is you, standing here exhausted, smelling of smoke, having personally ensured for 18 hours that the fire didn't die and the whole endeavor didn't devolve into a giant pork charcoal briquette. You oversee the carving of the meat, which is then served to the joyful, celebrating crowd. They will feast and drink, and the host will receive thunderous praise for his hospitality and the magnificent barbecue. You, the artist, the engineer, the true author of the feast, will remain invisible, a ghost of smoke and skill in the background. The last of the barbecue has been devoured, the guests have departed, and the fine china and silver of the big house have been washed and put away. The spectacle is over. You leave the now quiet plantation kitchen, the ghost of hickory smoke still clinging to your clothes and hair, and walk back toward the cluster of cabins that marks your own world. As you cross the manicured lawn and enter the rough, trodden dirt path to the quarters, it feels like crossing a national border. You are leaving the world you cook for and entering the world you live in. And in this world, the food is completely different. They call the food you make for them cuisine. They call the food you make for yourself rations. It's amazing what a nicer set of plates can do for a meal's reputation. After spending a full day and night transforming a prize hog into a culinary masterpiece, your reward is to be handed the parts of the animal that the enslaver deemed unfit for his own table. This is the so-called fifth quarter, or offal: the feet, the snout, the tail, the organs, the intestines. It's the ultimate thanks for your hard work bonus package. While the planter and his family dine on tenderloins and pork chops, you are left with the challenge of turning these tough, unfamiliar, and often unpleasant parts into something edible and, hopefully, something delicious. This is the genesis of many of the dishes that will one day be called soul food. It is a cuisine born not of choice but of necessity and profound ingenuity. Back at your cabin, the cooking technology reverts to its most basic form: a small fire outside your door. Here, The single iron pot you own is your most prized possession. Into it go the pig's feet, which you know must be scraped, cleaned meticulously, and then simmered for hours upon hours to break down the tough collagen and transform them into a gelatinous tender meal. Or perhaps you are tasked with cleaning the chitterlings, the pig's intestines, an incredibly laborious and foul-smelling job that requires dozens of washes before they are ready to be stewed with hot peppers and vinegar. Your African culinary heritage, with its emphasis on slow cooking and potent seasoning, is not just an advantage here, it is essential. You are using the techniques of your ancestors to make the scraps of your oppressors not just palatable, but desirable. The cornmeal from your weekly ration is transformed into a simple, life-sustaining bread. You mix it with a little water and salt, form it into a flat patty, and bake it directly in the hot ashes of your fire, perhaps resting it on a large collard leaf to keep it clean. This is an ash cake. Sometimes, out in the fields, this same dough would be cooked on the hot metal blade of a hoe held over a fire, giving birth to the hoe cake. Baking bread in ash isn't a technique you'd find in a fancy Parisian cookbook, but it's fast, efficient, and doesn't require an oven or even a pan. It's innovation driven by absolute necessity. Historians still argue about the degree to which the diet in the quarters was a conscious act of cultural preservation versus a simple pragmatic response to scarcity. Looking at the pot bubbling over your fire, filled with greens from your garden, perhaps some black-eyed peas, and the offal from the master's hog, you know that the question is meaningless. The two are inseparable. You are using the ingredients you were given, but you are cooking them in a way that feels like home. You are making a one-pot stew, seasoned with hot peppers, served and eaten communally. This is an act of survival, but it is also a stubborn refusal to forget who you are. It is both pragmatism and resistance, simmering together. As your family gathers around the fire, dipping pieces of ash cake into the rich, savory stew, the contrast with the big house is absolute. There is no silver, no crystal, no multiple courses, but there is flavor, there is nourishment, and there is community. Here, in the quiet darkness of the quarters, a new cuisine is being forged. It is a Creole cuisine in the truest sense of the word, blending African techniques and tastes with the cast-off ingredients of Europe and the native crops of the Americas. This is the foundational cooking of the South happening right here in the shadows, and it is from this pot, not the one in the big house kitchen, that the most enduring flavors will rise. One morning, the mistress of the house enters your domain, the hot, smoky kitchen, with a different kind of energy. She isn't here to inspect the pantry or to issue the day's menu. She carries with her a small, clean lap desk, a bottle of ink, and a stack of paper. She sets herself up at a small table in the corner, as far from the heat as possible, a place where she is both an observer and an intruder. She has decided to take an interest in your work today, which is always a special treat. She's here to document your process, kind of like a wildlife biologist observing a creature in its natural, smoke-filled habitat. She intends to write a cookbook, or more accurately, she intends for you to provide the contents for a cookbook that will have her name on the cover. This is a new and particularly insidious form of theft. Your labor, your body, your time, those were taken long ago. Now she has come for your knowledge, the one thing you felt you truly owned. The recipes in your head are not lists of measurements and instructions. They are symphonies of sense memory. They are the collected wisdom of your mother and her mother before her. You cook by feel, by smell, by the sound of oil sizzling in a pan, by the way a dough feels in your hands. But she needs words. She needs numbers. How much flour was that? She asks, pointing her pen at the biscuit dough you are expertly working. You look at the scoop, which you know from years of practice holds the perfect amount. This much, you say, showing her. She looks at the scoop, then at her paper, and with an air of scientific precision writes down 2 cups of flour. You know it was closer to 2.5, but 2 cups is a neat, tidy answer. Perfect for someone who will never have to worry about the dough being too sticky. You are making a simple stew, one you've prepared 1,000 times. She watches you, her pen scratching away. So you brown the meat first? She asks, as if witnessing a miracle. You nod, continuing your work. And a pinch of pepper, she inquires. You had thrown in what you know to be about half a teaspoon, a healthy, generous pinch, but you nod again. A pinch, she writes, underlining it. The entire process is a frustrating, clumsy act of translation. You are fluent in the language of food, and she is trying to write a dictionary with only a dozen words. Your intuitive, complex process is being flattened and simplified, reduced to a series of mechanical steps that miss the entire point. The real recipe is in the way you manage the fire, the way you listen to the pot, the way you trust your own palate. None of that can be captured in her spidery handwriting. Historians still argue about the consciousness of this theft. Were these mistresses callously and knowingly stealing intellectual property? Or did they genuinely believe within the deeply paternalistic and racist mindset of the era that the recipes created in their kitchen somehow belonged to their household and therefore to them? From your vantage point by the hearth, the distinction feels irrelevant. Your knowledge is being extracted like a tooth, and you have no say in the matter. You are watching yourself be erased from your own life's work. Soon, there will be a book. It will be celebrated for its authentic Southern charm. It will contain her definitive recipe for roasted fowl, her famous sweet potato pudding, and her delightful gumbo. It will be an amazing literary accomplishment for someone whose most advanced kitchen skill is ringing a small silver bell for service. These cookbooks are part of a larger project, the construction of the myth of the graceful Southern hostess, effortlessly presiding over a table laden with magnificent food. That myth is built on your back, on your skill, on your stolen genius. You are the ghostwriter for the entire culture of Southern hospitality. As the day ends, she gathers her papers, her notes smudged with a bit of stray ash. She might even offer a patronizing smile. Thank you, that was most illuminating. She leaves the kitchen, taking your knowledge with her, imprisoned on paper under her name. You are left in the heat and the smoke, with the heavy iron pots and the reality of the next meal you are still required to produce. You have provided the words for her book, but you know your own story will never be written. It will only be cooked and eaten and tasted over and over again by people who will never know your name. The mistress has her book of stolen words, but you have the living library. After she leaves, you return to your own small garden, a place of true and tangible knowledge. Here, the recipes aren't written in ink. They are written in the earth itself, passed down through seeds and roots. And in a sunny patch near your cabin, a low-lying, leafy green plant is thriving. To the casual observer, it's unremarkable, but you know its secret is hidden underground. You grasp the base of the plant and pull. The earth gives way, and you lift it to reveal a cluster of pale, knobbly shells clinging to the roots. This is the peanut, an ingredient with a story as complex and tangled as its own root system. You call it the goober, or the goober pea, a name that echoes across the Atlantic from the Kikongo word nguba. The planters find the name amusing, a piece of primitive nonsense, but they don't know its story. A mainstream fact, often misunderstood, is that the peanut is not native to Africa. Its grand tour began in South America, where it was first domesticated thousands of years ago. From there, Portuguese traders in their globe-spanning commerce carried it to Africa, and in Africa, it found a second home. Your people adopted it, cultivated it, and wove it so deeply into your cuisine that it became fundamentally African. It was you, the enslaved, who then completed its journey carrying it from Africa to this new continent. It is a world traveler, a culinary immigrant, its passport stamped on 3 continents. Right now, in the grand society of Southern agriculture, the peanut is considered low class. It's peasant food, something primarily used to fatten pigs. It is the culinary equivalent of a future movie star who is currently waiting tables and being completely ignored by the producers dining at the restaurant. But in the quarters, it is a lifeline. Its high fat and protein content make it incredibly nourishing, a powerful supplement to a meager diet. You roast them in the embers of your fire until the shells are blackened and the nut inside is fragrant and crisp. You boil them fresh from the ground in salty water, a simple delicacy that will one day become a beloved regional specialty. Most importantly, you use them in a way that is quintessentially African. You shell the roasted nuts and pound them into a thick, oily paste. This paste becomes the heart of your stews, a rich, nutty, and savory thickener that adds incredible depth of flavor. You are recreating the ground nut stews of your homeland, using the ingredients available to you. While the big house dines on elegant French-inspired cream sauces, you are here, creating a complex and satisfying sauce from this humble legume. One day, a brilliant man named George Washington Carver will discover hundreds of uses for the goober pea. But for now, its primary uses are delicious filling and a food so lowly the master won't bother to steal it from your plate. Historians still argue about the exact route the peanut took to get into these fields. Was it brought exclusively by your people directly from Africa, carried in the holds of slave ships like the other seeds of hope? Or did it also arrive via the Caribbean, where Spanish and Portuguese influence had already established it? The truth is likely a mix of both, a tangled web of trade and migration. But what is certain is that you and your people are the ones who truly established it here, not as a botanical curiosity, but as a food. You are the ones who know how to grow it, when to harvest it, and how to unlock its culinary potential. You sit outside your cabin as the sun sets, cracking the warm shells of freshly roasted goobers. The simple, satisfying act connects you to a past you are forced to forget, and a future you are unknowingly building. The planters in their ignorance see a weed. You see a survivor. You see a secret weapon. This unassuming nut, thriving in the margins of the plantation, is quietly preparing for its starring role in the coming culinary story of the South. A story that will be written not in the mistress's cookbook, but in the collective appetite of a nation. Your survival and the health of your family depend on making the most of everything. Every scrap of meat, every grain of corn, and every single leaf from your garden is a precious resource. You head to your provision plot, not to harvest tender young lettuces, but to gather the tough, hardy greens that can withstand the brutal summer heat. You gather collards, their leaves thick and waxy like small shields. You pull up turnips and mustard greens, their flavor sharp and peppery. You might even forage for wild greens at the edge of the woods like poke salad, a plant you know is poisonous unless boiled multiple times in fresh water. A piece of sophisticated botanical and culinary knowledge that stands between a meal and a tragedy. You bring your harvest back to your fire, a huge pile of leaves that seems like enough to feed the entire plantation. You stuff them into your all-purpose iron pot, adding a little water, and if you have it, a piece of salt pork or a smoked ham hock from your rations. You set the pot over the coals to begin a long, slow simmer. For hours, the greens bubble away, their sharp vegetal smell filling the air. As they cook, they perform their signature magic trick. You start with a mountain of leaves that could fill a bushel basket, and after a few hours of slow cooking, you're left with a modest, tender lump that would barely satisfy a hungry rabbit. It's the original incredible shrinking vegetable. But the greens themselves are only half the story. The true treasure is what they leave behind. After you've lifted the cooked greens from the pot, you are left with a dark, murky, and intensely fragrant liquid. This is the pot liquor. To the uninitiated, this broth looks like something to be discarded, the dishwater of dinner. But you know better. To throw out the pot liquor would be like throwing away the battery and keeping the useless remote control. This liquid is life. You know from generations of observation and passed down wisdom that this broth is where the true power of the greens resides. As they simmer for hours, their vitamins and minerals leach out into the water, creating a free, nutrient-dense superfood before the word even exists. It's packed with more essential vitamins than a fancy apothecary tonic, and its only side effect is that it tastes incredible. Historians and nutritionists will one day confirm what you already know in your bones. This pot liquor is rich in vitamin A, C, and K, as well as iron and calcium. It is the perfect antidote to the nutritional deficiencies of a diet based on little more than cornmeal and salted meat. The debate will linger as to whether this practice was an intuitive holdover from West African foodways, where no part of a meal was wasted, or a specific, conscious discovery made here in the Americas to fight off sickness. Standing over your fire, you understand it's not an either-or question. It is the application of ancient wisdom to a new and desperate problem. The pot liquor is rarely consumed on its own. It has a perfect, inseparable partner: your cornbread. You take a piece of the dense, crumbly ash cake you made earlier, a callback to your resourcefulness in Section 9, and crumble it into a bowl of the warm, savory broth. Or you dip the corner of a slice into the liquid, letting it soak up the rich, complex flavor, a mix of salty pork, earthy greens, and a hint of pepper. This combination is more than just a meal. It's a perfect nutritional pairing. The cornbread provides the calories and the pot liquor provides the essential micronutrients. It is a complete, life-sustaining system, invented from scraps, leftovers, and weeds. As you share this meal with your family, you are partaking in an act of quiet, powerful genius. You have taken the toughest, most unglamorous vegetables, cooked them down, and harvested their very essence, transforming what others would see as waste into the most nourishing part of the meal. This is the core principle of the cuisine you are creating. Finding wealth where no one else thinks to look, and spinning gold from the leaves that others would discard. In the small ecosystem of the quarters, you have a measure of control over one particular type of livestock: chickens. You are often allowed to raise your own flock. They scratch and peck around your cabin, foraging for insects and scraps, converting waste into precious protein. These birds are your personal property, a small but significant form of wealth and agency. They represent a Sunday dinner, a special occasion, or perhaps a few coins if you're allowed to sell them at a local market. And when it comes time to cook one, you often turn to a method that is fast, efficient, and transforms the humble bird into a masterpiece. You fry it. The sound is unmistakable, a loud, energetic sizzle as the chicken hits the hot fat in your heavy iron skillet. The smell of the seasoned coating toasting in the oil fills the air, a scent that signals celebration. The origins of this iconic dish, however, are as hotly debated as any political contest. Arguing over who invented fried chicken is a bit like arguing over who invented the idea of putting a roof on a house. Many cultures had the same good idea, but the specific architectural style of Southern fried chicken, the one that would conquer the world, is a story of a culinary collision. You know your version is the one everyone wants to eat, so you'll let the historians figure out the paperwork. Food historians still argue fiercely over the primary origin story. Was it a Scottish tradition that formed the foundation, or were West African frying techniques the true genesis? The truth is, it's a child of both. Immigrants from Scotland did have a tradition of frying chicken, but their method was often starkly simple: an unseasoned bird cooked in fat. It was functional but bland. It was a boring monologue. Your tradition, the West African culinary approach, is what provides the soul. You would never dream of cooking a piece of meat without seasoning it first. You create a complex blend of salt, black pepper, and perhaps a fiery pinch of cayenne pepper, rubbing it deep into the meat. Then comes the second crucial innovation: the coating. You dredge the seasoned pieces in flour, creating a jacket that will protect the meat, keeping it juicy while the outside becomes a crunchy, golden brown crust. This technique of dredging and deep frying is something you know well, used for everything from fish to vegetable fritters back home. You are combining a Scottish method with a West African flavor profile and technique. The result is something entirely new and impossibly delicious. The bland monologue has become a full-blown, show-stopping musical. And this special dish is often reserved for the most important meal of the week, Sunday dinner. After a week of back-breaking labor and a meager diet of cornmeal and pork, Sunday is a day of rest and community. A visiting preacher might come to lead a service, and to honor him, you would prepare your best. You'd catch one of your precious chickens and prepare this celebratory feast. It becomes the centerpiece of Preacher Day, a taste of joy and abundance in a life defined by scarcity. At first, this is a dish for your own community. It's quarters food. But the smell and the reputation of your fried chicken are impossible to contain. It's so good it starts getting requested for the big house table. A plate of it might be sent up for a special occasion, and soon it becomes a fixture of the planter's Sunday table as well. It is one of the first dishes to graduate from your world to theirs. A culinary ambassador that crosses the hostile border between the cabin and the mansion. It's the first of your foods to get a promotion to the executive suite. And you're not surprised it's the one leading the charge. As you carefully turn the pieces in the skillet, ensuring each one is cooked to perfection, you are presiding over the birth of an icon. This dish, with its Scottish framework and its African soul, is a perfect metaphor for the South itself. It's a story of cultures clashing, combining, and creating something new, even under the most brutal and unjust of circumstances. The final credit may go to the southern hospitality of the big house, but you know the secret ingredients, the spice, the coating, the soul, were all yours. After the celebratory sizzle of fried chicken, the kitchen returns to the rhythm of the everyday. And the everyday is built on a foundation of corn. Each week, you are allotted your ration of coarsely ground cornmeal, the primary fuel for the brutal labor of the plantation. It's the 18th century equivalent of being subscribed to a meal kit, where every single box for the rest of your life just contains a bag of cornmeal and a note that says, "Be creative." And so, out of sheer necessity, you are. In your hands, this single monotonous ingredient becomes the basis for an entire culinary universe. It's like being handed one note and composing a symphony. This grain is not from your homeland. It is fundamentally American, cultivated for millennia by the indigenous peoples of this continent. You learn from them, directly or indirectly, the ancient and crucial process of treating the dried corn with an alkaline solution, often using hardwood ash mixed with water. This process, called nixtamalization, does something miraculous. It softens the tough hull of the kernel, but more importantly, it chemically unlocks the niacin within, making it available for digestion and preventing the devastating deficiency disease of pellagra. This is a piece of scientific wisdom, passed down through Native American tradition that becomes the essential first step for much of your corn cookery. Your first and most basic transformation of this processed corn or hominy is to grind it and boil it into a thick, comforting porridge. You know this dish is grits. Historians and foodways scholars still debate its direct lineage. Is it a direct descendant of Native American corn porridges like the Muskogee Sofkee, or is it more accurately described as a reinterpretation of the millet and sorghum porridges that were a staple in West Africa, simply made with a new grain? For you, the answer is irrelevant. The concept of a slow-cooked grain porridge as the centerpiece of a meal is second nature. You know instinctively how to cook it. The key to good grits is patience. You add the grits to simmering water or milk, and you stir. You cook them low and slow over the dying coals of the hearth, letting the coarse grains soften and swell, releasing their starch until they become a creamy, soul-warming mass. Anyone who says they don't like grits has likely only tasted a pale, instant imitation, a true crime against both corn and the concept of breakfast. But you don't stop at porridge. You mix the dry cornmeal with water or buttermilk, a little salt, and perhaps a bit of lard for richness, and you create bread. In its simplest form, you've already made it as an ash cake, baked in the embers of your fire. But in the big house kitchen, you have access to better tools. You pour the batter into a spider skillet, a heavy three-legged piece of cast iron that can stand perfectly in the coals. You push embers underneath it and pile more on its flat lid, creating a miniature oven on the hearth. The result is a thick, golden-crusted cornbread, savory and dense, perfect for sopping up the pot liquor from your greens or serving alongside a roast. You also make thinner, faster versions. You drop spoonfuls of a looser batter into a hot, greased skillet to make crispy-edged corn cakes, or you fry up a patty of leftover cooled grits until it's golden brown on the outside and creamy within. You are endlessly inventive. While the planter might see cornmeal as a single, boring ingredient, you see it as a canvas. You have taken this foundational American grain, processed it using Native American techniques, and reinvented it through the lens of African culinary traditions to create a suite of dishes that will become the bedrock of the Southern table. Grits, cornbread, hoe cakes, mush, all of it born from a single bag of meal and an imagination sharpened by hunger and heritage. Life on the plantation is not all savory stews and daily bread. There is also the human craving for sweetness, a small taste of joy in a world of bitterness. But here, that sweetness is tainted by the deepest bitterness of all. Your primary source of sugar is the jug of molasses you are given with your weekly rations. It's the consolation prize of the sugar industry. This dark, thick, slightly metallic syrup is the byproduct of refining sugarcane, a crop whose cultivation is the most brutal, dangerous, and deadly form of labor in the Americas. The life expectancy of an enslaved person on a Louisiana or Caribbean sugar plantation was horrifically short. Every drop of the molasses in your jug is saturated with this human cost. The pure white crystalline sugar, the prize of the process, is reserved for the big house. You get its moody, dark, complicated cousin. Despite its grim origins, you take this dark syrup and work wonders. You stir it into your cornmeal porridge to make a sweet breakfast. You use it to bake dark, moist cakes and gingerbread, its strong flavor masking the coarseness of the meal. Making a beautiful dessert from molasses and cornmeal is a special kind of alchemy. It's like being asked to paint a masterpiece when you've only been given the colors brown and beige to work with. But you do it, creating small moments of pleasure for your family and community. In the big house kitchen, you have access to the prize, refined white sugar. And with it, the demands for European-style desserts are constant. The mistress wants a fancy pudding for her dinner party, a towering cake for a birthday, a delicate pie for a Sunday meal. Her only contribution to the creation of these confections is the consuming them part, which, to be fair, she has practiced to the point of expertise. So you learn the arts of pastry, puddings, and cakes, all within the unforgiving environment of the hearth. You beat egg whites to stiff peaks by hand with a whisk for what feels like an eternity. You cream butter and sugar in a bowl with a wooden spoon until your arm aches. You bake delicate cakes in a Dutch oven, carefully managing the coals on top and bottom to prevent the sugar from burning. It is here that you create the desserts that will become legendary. You take the sweet potatoes, the New World root you've adopted in place of your native yams, and transform them. You boil and mash them until they are a silky puree, then mix them with butter, eggs, sugar, and the warm spices of nutmeg and cinnamon. You pour this vibrant filling into a pastry crust and bake it into the iconic sweet potato pie, a dish that is a perfect fusion of African ingredients and European form. You make fruit cobblers and crisps with seasonal berries or peaches, topped with a simple biscuit dough. You perfect the pound cake, its simple but demanding recipe a testament to your skill. Historians and culinary anthropologists still debate the primary influence on the famously sweet Southern palate. Was it mostly an adaptation of British traditions of puddings, cakes, and pies? Or did West African preferences for very sweet flavors and fried doughs like the fritters you might make significantly shape the region's pronounced sweet tooth? Standing in the kitchen, you can feel that it is a marriage of both. The demand for British form is met with an African-influenced sensibility for flavor and sweetness. Sometimes, when fresh fruit is scarce in the winter, your ingenuity is truly tested. This is when you might make a desperation pie. With no apples or berries to be found, you create a surprisingly delicious sweet tart filling from pantry staples: sugar, a bit of cornmeal for thickness, butter, and the secret ingredient, cider vinegar for a tangy kick that mimics fruit. This creation, born of pure necessity, is a testament to your ability to conjure flavor from almost nothing. As you send a perfect, glistening sweet potato pie or a towering, sugar-dusted cake to the dining room, the bittersweet symphony is complete. The guests will praise its sweetness, its delicate texture, its comforting flavor. They taste only the pleasure. But you, the creator, are aware of the full composition. You know the sweetness on their tongues is the direct result of the most profound bitterness imaginable, the brutal, deadly labor of the sugar fields. You have created a moment of delight from an ingredient of despair. Your story of resourcefulness in the plantation kitchen, of spinning gold from scraps, is the story of hundreds of thousands of unnamed culinary artists. But there are a few whose names have survived, whose journeys were so extraordinary, they leave a distinct mark on history. For a moment, let's step into another's shoes. Your name is now James Hemings. You are enslaved by Thomas Jefferson, a man of Epicurean tastes and boundless ambition. And in 1784, your life takes a turn that is almost unimaginable. Jefferson is appointed minister to France, and he chooses you, a skilled 19-year-old, to accompany him to Paris with a single daunting mission: to become a master of French cuisine. You arrive in Paris and are immediately thrown into a different universe. You've gone from a kitchen where the most important tool is a single heavy iron pot over an open flame to a world of gleaming copper pans, specialized knives for every conceivable task, and a dizzying array of whisks. It's like graduating from simple arithmetic to advanced calculus overnight, but you are a quick and dedicated student. Jefferson pays for you to apprentice under the finest caterers and pastry chefs in Paris. the culinary capital of the world. You learn the 5 French mother sauces, the foundational pillars of French cooking, which you now understand are the matriarchs of the entire European food world. If something stands still for too long in Paris, a chef will find a way to poach it and cover it in a delicate hollandaise. Your job is to learn how. You master the art of puff pastry, of braising, of creating delicate desserts spun from sugar and cream. You become the chef de cuisine at Jefferson's grand residence, the Hôtel de Langeac, responsible for cooking the elaborate diplomatic dinners that are crucial to his political life. You manage a staff, you source ingredients from the chaotic and wonderful Parisian markets, and you execute flawless, multi-course meals. And you are paid a wage for your work. Here, you are not just a cook, you are a chef, a professional in a city that reveres your craft. And here you encounter the most profound paradox of your life. According to a quirky but firm principle of French law, any enslaved person who sets foot on the free soil of France is legally free. You could, at any moment, petition the French courts and walk away from Jefferson forever. You speak fluent French. You are a trained professional with a paying job. You could build a new life here, and yet, you don't. Jefferson makes you a promise. If you return with him to America and train your younger brother Peter to take your place, he will grant you your freedom. Historians still argue about the exact nature of the relationship between you and Jefferson. Was it one of genuine, albeit deeply unequal professional respect? Or was Jefferson simply protecting a valuable asset he had invested so much in training? You decide to trust the promise, to trade the immediate certainty of freedom in France for the precarious hope of it back home. You return to America in 1789, a culinary titan. You bring with you not just skills, but entire dishes that will forever change the American table. You introduce Jefferson's circle to a dish you mastered abroad, macaroni baked in a rich cheese sauce. You bring back the technique for what will become French fries and a new obsession with ice cream, which you now prepare with a level of sophistication previously unknown in the States. You are the conduit through which the height of European cuisine flows into America. Jefferson, the cosmopolitan foodie, gets all the credit. It's like you did all the research, wrote the entire paper, and made the presentation for a group project, and he just put his name on top and collected the A+. True to his word, after you spend years meticulously training your brother, Jefferson signs the papers for your manumission in 1796. You are a free man. You travel, you work as a chef in Philadelphia and Baltimore, but your story does not have a simple, happy ending. Your life is a constant navigation of a world that respects your immense skill, but despises your race. Your legacy is profound. You elevated American dining to an art form. But you remain a footnote, the brilliant enslaved ghost in the machine of Jefferson's celebrated Monticello kitchen. James Hemings negotiated his freedom with diplomacy and a contract, but there are other paths to liberty, some more direct and dangerous. Now you are no longer Hemings, your story changes. You are Hercules Posey, and you are the property of the first president of the United States, George Washington. You are, by all accounts, a culinary superstar, in the presidential households, first in New York and then in the temporary capital of Philadelphia. You preside over the kitchen with an iron fist and an artist's touch. You are the most celebrated chef in the new nation, and an invitation to the president's table is the most coveted social prize in the city. And people aren't lining up to discuss agricultural policy, they are coming for your food. You are a commanding figure both in and out of the kitchen. You are known for being impeccably dressed, a dandy who walks the Philadelphia streets with a cane. You run your kitchen with military precision, and your creations, from perfectly roasted meats to savory turtle soup and towering jellies, are legendary. You also have a keen business sense. As a perquisite of your position, you are allowed to sell the leftovers, the slops from the president's lavish table. This side hustle is incredibly lucrative. By some estimates, you earn nearly $200 a year for yourself, a fortune for any working person at the time, let alone someone who is legally considered property. You have fame, a measure of wealth, and the respect of the most powerful people in America, but you do not have freedom. Living in Philadelphia places you in a tantalizingly precarious position. Pennsylvania is a Quaker state, and it has passed a gradual abolition law. This law states that any enslaved adult who resides in the state for 6 consecutive months is automatically set free. Your owner, the president, a man who is publicly leading a new nation conceived in liberty, is privately terrified of this law. So he devises a cynical and cruel loophole. Just before your 6-month residency is complete, you and the other enslaved members of the household staff are sent on a vacation back to the Mount Vernon plantation in Virginia. It's the world's worst mandatory work trip, a legal maneuver designed specifically to reset the clock on your bondage and prevent you from claiming the freedom that is your right under state law. This constant, deliberate reminder of your status, this legal game played by the father of his country to keep you in chains, fuels a quiet resolve within you. You see the free black community thriving in Philadelphia. You see a life of self-determination just beyond your grasp. The fame and the fine clothes mean nothing compared to the fundamental right to own your own body and your own time. You decide that if you will not be given freedom, you will take it. On the evening of February 22, 1797, while the city celebrates George Washington's 65th birthday, you make your move. Under the cover of darkness and distraction, you walk out of the president's house, and you do not return. You leave a powerful, symbolic gift for your enslaver on his birthday: an empty kitchen, a ruined dinner service, and the undeniable statement of your own humanity. Washington is furious. He places ads, he sends agents to look for you, but you are gone. You have vanished into the network of free black communities, choosing a life of anonymity over a life of celebrated servitude. Historians still debate your ultimate fate. For many years, your trail went cold, a common occurrence for those who escaped slavery, as staying hidden often meant staying out of the historical record. Recent research suggests you made your way to New York City, living as a free man and working as a cook until your death in 1812. The details remain frustratingly elusive. What is clear is your choice. You stood at the pinnacle of your profession, a culinary celebrity in the heart of the new republic, and you gave it all up in a single, silent, defiant act. You walked away from the president's kitchen to find your own, proving that the taste of freedom, however uncertain, was sweeter than any feast you could ever create for another man. The stories of James Hemings and Hercules Posey are tales of chefs at the absolute pinnacle of society, navigating extraordinary circumstances. But their fame is the exception. Your story, the one shared by hundreds of thousands, plays out on a much smaller, yet no less significant stage. You are not cooking for presidents. You are cooking for survival, for community, and for a few precious coins that represent a taste of freedom. Your grand arena is not a presidential dining room, but the bustling, chaotic, and vibrant Sunday market. Sunday is your day of rest from the plantation's demands, which often means you are free to do a completely different, equally exhausting kind of work for yourself. It's the gig economy, 18th century style, complete with an all-powerful, oppressive CEO. You take the small surplus from your labors, the extra eggs your chickens have laid, a plump bird you've raised, the vegetables from your garden that your family won't eat that week, or perhaps the fish you caught in the river on your own time, and you take it to town. The Sunday market is a dizzying democratic space. Here, for a few hours, the rigid hierarchies of the plantation blur. You see wealthy planters, poor white farmers, free black artisans, and even local Native Americans, all mingling and haggling. It is loud, crowded, and for you, it is a lifeline. You find a small spot to lay out your blanket and arrange your wares. You are now a business owner, a vendor in what was sometimes called the Negro economy. This participation was often permitted by enslavers not out of kindness, but for a calculated reason. If you could earn a little money to buy your own shoes or a bit of cloth or a pot, that was one less expense for them to cover. Historians still argue about the true nature of this market participation. Was it a genuine safety valve that gave enslaved people a sense of hope and thus reduced rebellion, as some planters claimed? Or was it simply another, more insidious form of exploitation, where you were goaded into providing for your own basic needs? You know that whatever the master's reason, the opportunity is real, and you seize it. You do more than just sell raw ingredients. Your true advantage is your skill as a cook. You might spend all of Saturday night over your small fire, preparing food to sell. You could make fried fish, seasoned perfectly, and served hot from a skillet. You might sell your ash cakes or sweet potato pies by the slice. In cities like Charleston or New Orleans, you might even become a dedicated street food vendor, a true pioneer of the craft. A particularly popular dish was pepper pot soup, a fiery tripe-based stew with West African roots. You could keep it bubbling in a great cauldron all day, selling it by the bowl to hungry market-goers. You're essentially running a pop-up restaurant, just without the trendy truck or the social media marketing. When a customer, white or black, pays you for a piece of your fried chicken, the small coin they place in your hand is electric. It is yours. It is not part of the plantation ledger. It is real, tangible proof of the value of your skill. You hide the few coins you earn carefully. This isn't the kind of cash you can leave lying around lest it be reallocated by management. This money represents a sliver of autonomy. It might buy a colorful ribbon for your daughter's hair, a bit of precious sugar to sweeten a cake, or a new tool for your garden. For a very few, over the course of a lifetime, this slow, painstaking accumulation of capital could even be enough to purchase the freedom of a loved one, or, in the rarest of cases, themselves. But the market is more than just a place of commerce. It is the central nervous system of the enslaved community. It is where you exchange news and information between plantations, where you see family members who have been sold away, where you maintain the social bonds that the system of slavery is designed to break. It is a place of culture, community, and commerce, all simmering together like the pepper pot in your kettle. Here, for a few stolen hours every week, you are not just property. You are a chef, an entrepreneur, and a citizen of your own resilient, invisible nation. The coins you earn at the Sunday market are a small buffer against a world of uncertainty, but the greatest uncertainty you face daily is the food itself. Your kitchen has no refrigerator. Your crisper drawer is a hole in the ground known as a root cellar, and your freezer is the handful of days in winter when the temperature drops below freezing. Spoilage is not a risk. It is a constant, aggressive opponent in a race you must run every single day. Letting food go to waste is not an option, and so, you become a master of the ancient arts of preservation, a scientist of salt, smoke, and acid. When a hog is slaughtered, it is a time of rare abundance, but it is also an emergency. Hundreds of pounds of fresh meat must be preserved, and quickly. This is where the smokehouse becomes the cathedral of the plantation. The process you oversee is a two-part miracle of food science. First comes the salt. You take the large cuts of pork, the hams, the shoulders, the bellies, and pack them in salt, burying them in it for weeks. The salt is a desiccant pulling moisture out of the meat, creating an environment where the bacteria that cause spoilage cannot survive. After the curing, the meat is washed and hung in the smokehouse. This small, dark, windowless building is your slow cooker. For days or even weeks, you keep a low, smoldering fire of hickory or applewood going, filling the space with a thick, fragrant smoke. The smokehouse is basically a long-term sauna for meat, except instead of a relaxing spa day, the pork is being dehydrated, cooked, and infused with a flavor that will be revered for centuries. The pigs, one must assume, were not fans of the process. This is the birth of the legendary Southern country ham and bacon, foods of intense concentrated flavor, created not for a dinner party, but to survive the winter. What you do for meat with salt and smoke, you do for vegetables with vinegar and spice. This is the magic of pickling. You've discovered that a long bath in a vat of salty, acidic brine can extend the life of almost any vegetable indefinitely. You have jars and crocks filled with your experiments. You pickle cucumbers, of course, but also green beans, okra, corn, and beets. You create tangy, spicy relishes like chow chow, a mix of chopped cabbage, peppers, and onions that can liven up a winter meal of salted pork and cornbread. If a vegetable doesn't move too fast, you're probably going to find a way to pickle it. Your true genius for preservation, your masterclass in the art of using everything, is revealed in what you do with watermelon. In the heat of summer, the cool, sweet red flesh is a moment of pure joy. But you know the thick white and green rind is also valuable. You peel off the tough outer skin, cut the rind into chunks, and simmer it in a brine of vinegar, sugar, and spices like cinnamon and clove. The bland, tough rind undergoes a stunning transformation, becoming a sweet, tangy, and surprisingly crisp treat. almost like a piece of candy. You have created a delicacy from the garbage pile. Food historians debate the primary origins of these preservation methods. While salting, smoking, and pickling were common in Europe, the specific flavor profiles you create are uniquely your own. The European tradition might favor simple salt pickles, but your brines are often complex, infused with the heat of the fiery peppers you grow in your garden. This heavy use of spice, this desire not just to preserve the food but to transform it into something intensely flavorful, points to a West African culinary sensibility. You are not just a scientist, you are an artist turning a utilitarian process into a creative one. Drying is another tool in your arsenal. You slice apples or peaches and lay them out on the hot tin roof of a shed to bake in the sun, creating leathery, sweet snacks for the winter. You hang bundles of herbs from the rafters of your cabin, preserving their flavor for your stews. Through all these methods, you are not just fighting decay. You are creating a pantry. You are building a buffer of flavor and security against the lean months, ensuring that the bounty of the summer can be tasted even in the deepest, darkest days of winter. The pantry of preserved foods you've created is a bulwark against hunger, but survival is not just about calories. It's also about the spirit, and the spirit is fed by flavor. Your weekly ration of cornmeal and salt pork has all the flavor and excitement of a dusty ledger book. It is sustenance, but it is not joy. For vibrancy, for a taste that reminds you that you are alive, you turn to your arsenal of spices, chief among them, the hot pepper. In your garden, you cultivate these small, fiery pods, their colors ranging from a vibrant green to a furious red. They are your secret weapon, a rescue mission for your taste buds. Like the peanut, the hot pepper has a story of global travel. It is a native of the Americas, first domesticated in Central and South America. It was then carried across the world by European traders, where it was enthusiastically adopted into the cuisines of Africa and Asia. It found a particularly welcome home in West Africa, where it was woven into the very fabric of the food culture. Then, in one of history's great tragic ironies, your ancestors brought their love for this American plant, now imbued with an African culinary soul, back across the Atlantic. These peppers have seen more of the world than the man who claims to own you, and they carry the spicy, complex stories of their journey in their very flesh. You understand that heat is a tool, not a weapon. It is a dial, not a simple on-off switch. You know how to use it to awaken the palate, to cut through the richness of fatty pork, to add a high note to a long-simmered stew. You mash the fresh peppers into sauces or dry them to be crushed into a powder that will last all year. You infuse them in vinegar, creating a condiment that can be splashed over a plate of greens and pot liquor, adding a bright, acidic fire that transforms the entire dish. This understanding of spice is a core tenet of your culinary philosophy. And it's not just peppers. You might also have access to grains of paradise, a truly unique West African spice. These small reddish-brown seeds have a pungent, peppery flavor with hints of flowers and citrus. For a time, they were a major export from West Africa, sometimes used by you and others as a more affordable and more complex substitute for black pepper. The presence of this spice is a direct, tangible link, a whisper of the specific markets and flavors of your lost home. Culinary historians still debate the primary function of such heavy spicing in the food of the enslaved. Was it a practical measure? A way to make slightly spoiled or unpalatable food more edible and to kill bacteria? Or was it a purely cultural act, a deliberate and defiant retention of the bold flavor profiles of the West African palate in a world that sought to crush every other aspect of your heritage? Standing over your pot, adding a careful pinch of crushed pepper, you know the answer is yes to both. It is a tool for survival that is also an expression of identity. This flavor philosophy finds its ultimate expression in the pepper pot soup you sell at the Sunday market. You take the most humble of ingredients, the tripe or stomach lining of a cow or pig, and you transform it. You clean it meticulously and simmer it for hours until it is tender. You add whatever vegetables you have, but the soul of the dish is the spice, a rich, fragrant broth, humming with the heat of peppers and seasoned perhaps with those grains of paradise. This dish, sold from a steaming cauldron on a city street corner, is a declaration. It is a complex, intensely flavored, and defiantly African dish, created from the cast-offs of the American butchering system. It is the perfect symbol of your culinary art, taking the ignored and the discarded and turning it into something celebrated, vibrant, and unforgettable. The world is broken open. The news comes in waves and whispers in the triumphant shouts of soldiers riding down the dusty roads. War, emancipation, freedom. The words are so immense they are almost meaningless. You are free. The chains are gone. You can, for the first time in your life, walk away from the plantation. The joy is terrifying, overwhelming, and mixed with a profound sense of uncertainty. What do you do now? Where do you go? For many, the first instinct is to find family, a husband, a wife, a child sold away years ago. But after the initial chaotic shuffling, a new and difficult reality begins to set in. You are free, but you are also landless and penniless in a hostile world. You soon find yourself entering into a new kind of arrangement, a system called sharecropping. The landowner, who is often the very same man who once enslaved you, offers you a plot of land to farm. In exchange for your labor, you will give him a share of the crop, usually half. It sounds like a chance, a step up. But then come the details. You must buy your seeds, your tools, your food, and your clothing on credit from his store, where the prices are inflated to an impossible degree. At the end of the year, after you have given him his half of the crop, you find that what you owe him for supplies is more than the value of your half. You have ended the year deeper in debt than you started. The physical chains have been replaced by the invisible chains of debt peonage. It feels less like a grand liberation and more like being forced to switch from one terrible, exploitative contract to another. And so, the food on your plate, which you hoped would taste of freedom, often tastes much like it did before. Your diet is still dominated by the 3 M's: meat, fatty salt pork, meal, cornmeal, and molasses. The landowner's store is where you get your supplies, and this is what he provides. You are still making cornbread and grits. You are still stewing tough greens with a piece of pork to make them palatable. You are still finding ways to make a little bit go a long way. Historians still argue about the true extent of dietary improvement after emancipation. While you now have more freedom to hunt, fish, and forage, did the crushing poverty of the sharecropping system mean that, for many, the daily diet was just as, or in some cases even more, nutritionally deficient than it had been under slavery? But something has fundamentally changed. The food is now truly your own, and it becomes the centerpiece of new traditions. For the first time, you can gather as a community without the oversight of the master. Church picnics become huge, important social events. You and the other women of the congregation spend days preparing food. The dishes that were once rare, celebratory treats, the fried chicken, the barbecue, the sweet potato pies, are now the staples of these gatherings. You are not just feeding your family, you are building a new culture, one potluck at a time. A new holiday enters your calendar, Emancipation Day or Juneteenth. This is a day of pure celebration, of music, parades, and of course, food. A fascinating tradition emerges at these celebrations, a preference for red-colored foods and drinks. You might make a strawberry pie, or serve a drink made from red hibiscus. This red drink is symbolic, a remembrance of the bloodshed of slavery and a celebration of the resilience of your people. It is a culinary expression of a shared history and a hard-won freedom. So while the daily struggle remains, the context has shifted. The culinary knowledge you forged in the quarters is no longer just a tool for survival within a system of bondage. It is now the foundation of your cultural identity as a free people. The recipes, techniques, and flavors are a source of pride and continuity in a world that is still violent and unjust. Every church picnic, every shared meal, is a quiet declaration that you have endured, and that your traditions which sustained you through the darkness will now nourish you in the uncertain light of freedom. Decades pass. The cycle of debt from sharecropping and the brutal realities of Jim Crow segregation have choked the hope that bloomed after emancipation. And so, you make another momentous decision. You decide to leave. You join a great river of people, a current of humanity flowing out of the rural South. This is the Great Migration. You sell what little you have, pack a single suitcase, and board a crowded, segregated train heading north. You decide to trade the familiar, grinding poverty of the farm for the exciting, unknown challenges of a factory job in a city like Chicago, Detroit, or Harlem. It's what they call upward mobility. The journey itself is a lesson in the ingenuity your culture has perfected. You cannot go to the train's dining car, so you carry your provisions with you. You have a shoebox lunch, a humble name for what is actually a carefully prepared feast. Inside a clean shoebox, you've packed crispy cold-fried chicken, a few hard-boiled eggs, a thick slice of pound cake, and perhaps a biscuit with a piece of ham. This is more than just a meal. It is a declaration of independence, a rolling, self-contained testament to your ability to provide for yourself and your family with dignity and skill, even while traveling through a world that denies you the most basic courtesies. You arrive in the North, and the culture shock is a physical force. You step out of the train station into a world of concrete and steel, a cacophony of streetcars, automobiles, and 1,000 languages you don't understand. You came from a world of dirt roads and wide-open skies. Now you live in a cramped tenement apartment in a building full of strangers. You quickly realize that the land of milk and honey is also the land of wow. I really should have brought a heavier coat. The wind whipping off Lake Michigan feels like a personal insult. In this cold, alienating new city, you cling to the familiar, and the most powerful piece of home you have brought with you is your food. In your small apartment kitchen, you recreate the dishes you have always known. The smell of a pot of collard greens simmering with a smoked turkey wing fills the hallway, an aromatic announcement of your arrival. You make cornbread, fried fish on Fridays, and black-eyed peas. This food is your anchor. It is a way to build community, sharing a meal with other recent arrivals from the South, forging new family bonds in the shared language of taste. Soon, small storefront restaurants open, run by enterprising women who cook the food of home for the thousands of homesick migrants. These places become community centers, places to find a good meal, hear the latest news, and feel for an hour like you are back down south. Sociologists and food historians still debate the impact of this migration on the cuisine. Did moving to cities with access to different ingredients and grocery stores dilute the traditional foodways, or did it actually preserve them by creating a concentrated market and a new defiant sense of cultural identity around the cooking? From your kitchen, you see both happening. You might use a different kind of smoked meat, or buy your greens from a store instead of your garden, but the soul of the dish remains the same. And then, in the middle of the 20th century, during the cultural ferment of the civil rights and Black Power movements, your cuisine is finally given a name that captures its essence. It is called soul food. The name is a proud, defiant declaration. It links the food explicitly to Black culture, to soul music, to the concept of soul brother and soul sister. It announces that this is not just Southern cooking. This is the specific culinary heritage of Black Americans, a cuisine with a history, a meaning, and a soul forged in the fires of slavery and tempered in the struggles of freedom. The humble cooking of the quarters has traveled north, put on a new suit of clothes, and proudly introduced itself to the world. The name soul food gives your cuisine a proud public identity, and with that identity comes a new wave of entrepreneurship, a chance to turn the uncredited genius of the past into a tangible legacy. You watch as the informal commerce of the Sunday market and the necessity-driven diners of the northern cities evolve into something more. A proud tradition of Black culinary enterprise, built against nearly impossible odds. This is the story of how your ancestors' recipes went from being stolen for a mistress's cookbook to being the foundation of business empires. This tradition of culinary professionalism has deep roots. Long before the Civil War, a man named Robert Roberts, who had been born into slavery, published a book in 1827 called The House Servant's Directory. It was a detailed manual on how to manage an elite household, complete with instructions for cleaning, serving, and crucially, recipes. It was one of the very first books published by an African American, a clear signal that the knowledge possessed by Black domestic workers was a sophisticated and codifiable science. After emancipation, this professionalism found an outlet in the world of catering. In cities like Philadelphia and Washington, D.C., a class of elite Black caterers emerged. These entrepreneurs, often men and women who had been enslaved in the kitchens of the wealthy, were sought after by the very same white high society that excluded them from every other aspect of public life. You see the delicious irony. The wealthiest families in the city, who would never dream of sharing a table with a black person, were simultaneously competing to hire black-owned catering companies to orchestrate their most important social events. Their skill was simply too good to deny. Then, as the 20th century progresses, the center of this entrepreneurial energy shifts to the restaurant. In the bustling neighborhoods of Harlem, Chicago's South Side, and countless other cities, soul food restaurants become more than just places to eat. They are institutions. You can now walk into an establishment owned and operated by people who look like you and order a plate of food that tastes like home. You can see a woman like the legendary Sylvia Woods in Harlem, who started with a small lunch counter and built it into an internationally recognized landmark. Or you see a chef like Leah Chase in New Orleans, whose restaurant, Dookie Chase's, became a sanctuary and strategy room for civil rights leaders. These restaurants are not quiet, stuffy temples of fine dining. They are loud, joyful, and bustling with life. They are community centers, unofficial town halls, and safe havens. The business model is refreshingly simple. Make food that tastes like a Southern grandmother's comforting hug, and people, black and white, will line up down the block for it. It remains a powerful and undefeated strategy. These establishments become engines of economic empowerment, hiring from within the community, supporting other black-owned businesses, and creating generational wealth. Historians and economists still debate the dual role of these culinary businesses. Were they primarily enclaves, spaces that served the black community and fostered an independent internal economy? Or were they also crucial bridges, introducing black culture and cuisine to the wider white population, thereby playing a vital role in cultural exchange and integration? The truth is, they were both. They were safe harbors that also served as cultural embassies. You watch with pride as these entrepreneurs succeed. They are the direct heirs to the anonymous cooks of the plantation. They have taken the knowledge that was once considered mere labor, the recipes that were dismissed as simple rations, and they have proudly displayed their value to the world. They have built their businesses on a foundation of pot liquor and cornbread, of perfectly seasoned fried chicken and slow-simmered greens. They have taken the soul of the cuisine and given it a home, a balance sheet, and a bright neon sign, ensuring that the legacy of their ancestors would not just be remembered but celebrated and savored. You have traveled through centuries of history, from a sun-drenched market in West Africa to the grim hold of a ship, from the smoke of the plantation kitchen to the bright lights of a Harlem restaurant. And now, you find yourself in the present day. You are sitting in your own home in a world utterly transformed. The story, which has been a ghost for so long, a whisper in the pantry, is finally being told out loud, in brilliant, passionate, and unapologetic voices. A new generation is taking up the mantle, not just as cooks and entrepreneurs, but as detectives, scholars, and artists. You pick up a book by a food historian like the great Dr. Jessica B. Harris, and suddenly the threads of the story connect. You read her work and trace the path of a single bean, a cooking technique, a flavor preference from Africa to the Americas with stunning academic rigor. Or you read a book like The Cooking Gene by Michael W. Twitty, and the story becomes intensely personal. He is a new kind of historian, one who uses his own DNA, genealogical research, and historical reenactment to trace the journey of his ancestors. He is a detective, but instead of solving a crime, he's solving the delicious mystery of why his family's food tastes the way it does. He goes to the very plantations where his ancestors were enslaved and cooks using their methods, their tools, and their ingredients. He stands over an open hearth using a spider skillet, connecting with the past in a way that is visceral and profound. He is literally resurrecting the ghosts of the kitchen and giving them a voice. You turn on a food documentary and you see chefs like Mashama Bailey of The Gray in Savannah, Georgia. She is not just recreating old recipes, she is deconstructing and reimagining them. She is taking the foundational ingredients and flavors, the seafood, the rice, the fresh vegetables, and elevating them with modern techniques, earning the highest accolades in the culinary world. You see chefs making collard green kimchi or turning pot liquor into a delicate, flavorful broth for a fine dining soup. Your ancestors would be both incredibly proud and probably deeply confused by this culinary wizardry. This new movement is forcing a conversation. A vibrant debate is now happening within the food world itself. What is the future of soul food? Should it be preserved in its classic form, a delicious museum of tradition? Or should it be allowed to evolve, to become healthier, to incorporate new ingredients and global influences, all while honoring its deep and often painful roots? The very existence of this debate is a sign of the cuisine's vitality. It is no longer just survival food. It is a living, breathing culinary art form, worthy of serious discussion. What all these modern figures have in common is a shared mission: to reclaim the narrative. They are peeling back the layers of myth and appropriation and exposing the truth that has been sitting on the American plate for centuries. They are giving credit to the invisible women in the plantation kitchens, to the resourceful men at the barbecue pits, to the grandmothers who packed the shoebox lunches. It's a massive, collective act of setting the historical record straight. It has only taken a few hundred years, which in the grand scheme of history is, well, it's still an unconscionably long time. But the work has finally begun. You realize, as you read their books and taste their food, that this story is the quintessential American story. It is a tale of immigration, of forced adaptation, of survival, of breathtaking creativity in the face of unimaginable oppression. These modern chefs and scholars are not just saving recipes. They are saving a crucial part of the nation's soul, proving that the kitchen was never just a place of servitude. It was a laboratory, a studio, a sanctuary, and a silent, enduring monument to the genius of its creators. You are sitting at a table. In front of you is a plate, a familiar landscape of Southern food. But you are not the same person who sat down at the beginning of this journey. You see this plate with new eyes, an X-ray vision that penetrates the surface and reveals the centuries of history simmering beneath. This is no longer just a meal. It is a map, a library, a symphony. Every bite tells a story you now understand. You look at the piece of fried chicken, its crust a perfect, craggy golden brown. You no longer see just a piece of chicken. You see the Scottish method of frying in fat, a simple, stark technique that was transformed and given its soul by the West African insistence on bold seasoning, the magic of a spiced flour dredge, and the loving patience of a Sunday dinner in the quarters. You see Hercules Posey, a master of his craft, choosing freedom over the fame this very dish brought him. Next to it is a creamy pool of shrimp and grits. You see the foundational grain of the Americas, corn, given to you as a monotonous ration. But you also see the ghost of a West African millet porridge, the muscle memory of slow stirring over a fire, a technique of transforming a coarse grain into something comforting and sublime. You see the bounty of the coastal waters, woven into a dish that speaks of the collision of continents on the Carolina coast. There is a mound of dark, glossy collard greens, shimmering with the richness of the smoked pork they were cooked with. You don't just see a vegetable. You see the wisdom of pot liquor, the nutritional genius of capturing every last vitamin in the dark, savory broth. You see the small provision gardens carved out of the worst soil that became sanctuaries of cultural and physical survival. And you have the sudden urge to ask for a piece of cornbread, not just to eat, but to crumble into that precious liquid, completing a perfect, centuries-old system of nourishment. The long-running scholarly debate about the origins of this cuisine seems to resolve itself right here on your plate. It is now clear to you, as it is to most food historians, that the West African influence is not merely an ingredient or a minor flavor note. It is the foundational grammar, the very structure and soul of the meal. The one-pot stews, the deep frying, the slow smoking of meat, the heavy use of peppers and spices, the combination of savory and sweet, the use of the entire animal and plant. These are the principles that define the cuisine. You recognize the food on this plate as a collection of memory dishes. These recipes are edible archives, carrying the cultural DNA of a people whose other records were systematically destroyed. Each dish is a testament to an unwritten history, passed down not on paper but from a mother's hands to her daughters, from one cook to the next. The names of the individual creators are lost to us forever, erased by the brutal ledgers of slavery. We will never know the name of the woman who first thought to pickle a watermelon rind, or the man who perfected his barbecue pit over a lifetime of smoky nights. Their names are gone, but their genius remains. It is in the balance of the flavors, the texture of the food, the resourcefulness of the ingredients. They were artists without studios, scientists without laboratories, authors without pens. The kitchen was their only canvas, the hearth their only forge. And the legacy they created is not a silent stone monument. It is this warm, living, and profoundly delicious meal in front of you. It is a history that you can not only learn, but also taste. And in doing so, you finally, after all this time, give credit to the invisible hands that fed a nation. And so our long journey together comes to a gentle close. The story is told, the meal is understood, and the ghosts of the kitchen can finally rest. Their contributions seen and their names, though lost, are honored in the warmth that the memory of their food still provides. Think of this story not as an ending, but as a new lens through which to see the world, a new layer of flavor to appreciate in the meals that grace your own table. Let the echo of the hearth and the quiet wisdom of the cook be a gentle hum in the background of your own life, a reminder of the resilience and the breathtaking creativity that can arise from even the most profound hardship. The table is cleared now. The kitchen is quiet, and all that is left is the deep, soulful satisfaction of a story that has finally been brought into the light. The journey through the past is over, and we can now rest in the quiet understanding of the present, where every bite will forevermore carry the weight and the beauty of this long and winding history. Dim the lights just a little bit further now and let the gentle silence settle around you like a warm blanket.